Hello coders, today we're going to be talking about how to become a better web developer. And I have the pleasure of being joined by Emma Wedekind, and we're going to be talking about all the things you need to sort of do to become better as a developer. Hi Emma, how's it going? Have you had a good week?
I have had a great week. How are you, Peter?
Yeah, it's good. Super busy at the moment, but really glad that we've managed to do this thing. We've actually been planning this for a bit.
We have. I apologize. I've been so busy, and you caught me in a great time because I leave for California in a day, so it's perfect timing.
Oh,
but
wow.
I apologize it took so long.
No. It's both. It's my fault too. I mean, There's so much going on at the moment in both my sort of working life and so forth that, times just don't sort of happen, and time zones are awful.
Oh, yes.
So what are you doing in your travels?
So in my trip to California, I'm actually going for a design systems, I wouldn't call it a workshop. We're just going to go collaborate out in California with some of our colleagues and get our design system moving.
No way. Awesome. That sounds super cool.
Yeah.
Who are you doing that with?
I work at LogMeIn.
Nice. So that's like a workshop that they're putting on.
I'm actually running it, which is really cool. So it's just going to be maybe 5 of us, and we're just going to sit in a room and we're going to discuss content and design and the style guide and all that fun stuff.
Awesome. That sounds super cool. You're also an instructor at Eggheadio. Plus, you're the creator of Coding Coach and a UX developer at LogMeIn, as you've just mentioned. That's loads of stuff. How do you fit it all in?
I really don't know. It's at the expense of my sanity. I have a lot to do, but I love it. I hate being bored. And so I constantly fill myself up with different tasks that I can do to fill in literally every spare second of my day. So it's a lot of productivity that I need to work on and time boxing and all of that.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a whole different podcast. So
I could talk about
time
that for
management.
A while.
Yeah. But before we get into talking about how to become a better developer, let's discuss your background. And so how did you get into web development?
Yeah. So by accident is the short answer. So I was my whole life I wanted to be an obstetrician and OBGYN. So I wanted to deliver babies for a living.
Oh, wow.
I was the little 6-year-old kid watching shows about birthing, and it was the weirdest thing. Okay. I know that's weird, but that's what I was convinced I was going to do. And then I got to college, and my first semester, I almost failed out. It was so bad. And I was okay, maybe I should reevaluate this goal. I'm going to switch to actuarial science. And so I did that for a little bit, which is a lot of statistics and math. And that's where I took my first intro to computer science course. And so that's where I was exposed to binary, the history of computers and all that fun stuff. And I just clicked immediately. So my sophomore year declared a major in computer science. And that's where I got exposure to that. But I primarily just learned Java and, the computer sciencey type of things. It was more back-end dev. So when I had accepted my first role at IBM in Texas, I got a call one day from the hiring manager a few months before I was supposed to start. And they said, "Hey, we had an opening on the web development team. We were thinking about putting you in there. Are you cool with it?" I was yeah, HTML and CSS are easy. Let's go for it. And then I got to the first day of my job, and I realized, way in over my head. So that's the long answer of how I got into web development.
Is that the typical sort of a back-end developer looking at front-end stuff and going, that's actually terribly easy compared to what I'm doing right now? Yeah, that's a huge pet peeve is this nonsensical gatekeeping of oh, well, you do web dev, you're not a real developer. It's okay, I can still work in a database. I can still work with even assembly code. So yeah, I'm still a real developer. And regardless of what area of development you work in, you're a developer. Even if you're working on WordPress sites, and I hate that gatekeeping. So yeah, I could talk about that for a whole episode. So, what was the thing that you said it clicked, right? You said that coding clicked. How did it click? What was the thing that made you know that it clicked?
So I have always been very creative from a musical perspective. I played music like my whole entire life. I taught myself piano around age 5. And then like I played trumpet for how many years? I couldn't even tell you, like a long time. And so I was even debating a career in music for a while because I love the creative side of things. Yeah. I think what I like is that there's no one way to play a song, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I was in my computer science class and we were learning about programming, I was like, well, this is really cool because I get to use the analytical side of my brain to solve problems, but there's not one way to solve this problem. I get to explore different routes. And so that was what really intrigued me about it.
Okay. So it was an intriguing thing. You found that you were able to play around with solutions to problems and
it's all problem solving when you get down to it, right? So I was always that kid too that would like walk around with like those logic puzzle books. Like I just love that kind of stuff. So it just seemed kind of like a natural fit. And I think honestly, like if I'm being real, I think part of the reason I stuck with computer science was proving people wrong. Like my whole life, like, you know, we talk about women in tech being underrepresented and maybe having some barriers to overcome. My whole life, I've always wanted to prove people wrong who told me I couldn't do things. So like I was in the fire department growing up. Like I did all the things that people didn't expect from me. I played trumpet, which is primarily male dominated. And so I think for me, that was very alluring of like, you know what, like, yeah, I'm a woman, but I can still do this stuff and I'm going to kick butt at it.
Of course. Yes, of course. Okay. So you mentioned that you were in IBM doing Java. How did that move into UX?
That's a fun story. So, my first role was in front end dev and I was working on enterprise storage systems and I was doing front end dev for that. And it was, since I was trying to play catch up for all of these years of like web development that I had missed, I was really struggling. I was having such a hard time. Like I went home every day and questioned every decision I'd ever made up until this point.
Okay.
And then my manager pulled me in one day and she was like, hey, we're going to put you on this accessibility project. We need to overhaul our products with accessibility. We want you to be in charge of that. And so I did that and I really liked it because I saw the problems and there were very clear solutions. So I made that accessible. And while I was doing that, I knew I did not want to work in enterprise storage my whole life. It's just not something that clicked with me. I didn't understand like all of the different things go, like what is a DS8000? I couldn't tell you. Right. So at that point, like I had the discussion with my manager of like, okay, maybe this product is not the right fit for me. And so I began applying internally to other roles. And I received an email one day from a vice president of systems and transformation, which is an organization. And he said, hey, would you like to join my design team? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Why not? Yeah, like that sounds cool. And the designers were known for having like the coolest studio space and like throwing really fun parties and stuff. So I was like, yeah, like that sounds really cool. Why not? I don't know anything about design. So I moved onto the design team and it changed my life because I got exposure to so many different projects. So like I worked on Linux on Power Developer Portal, which is like an open source platform for finding Linux packages. And I got to work on support transformation. So redefining how support looks within IBM products. And then my last project was quantum computing, which was like the coolest thing.
Wow.
And so each project I got exposure to new technologies. I got to kind of govern my own workflow and my tech stack. And I also got to learn a lot about design and the design thinking process and creating user flows and heuristics behind UX. And it was just, it transformed the way that I interact with the world.
Right. So. Awesome. That's such a good story. I mean, I love hearing about how a transition has happened through conversations, perhaps with managers and stuff, that has led you on to different paths. I mean, do you ever look back to the Java days and go, you know, what could I be doing if I was just doing Java right now?
I don't think I'd be in development if I was still working back end. In all honesty, I think that it's a lot harder to get into. Why I like web dev is it's all in the browser. A lot of it's in the browser. Yeah, it's in the browser. I'm tired. So what's great about that is you can write an application, you can spin up a local server, and you can see your changes live in like instantly, right? With the back end, it's a little bit different. You're not getting the same type of experience. And I'm a very visual person. So I had trouble connecting with the back end, and Java is a very robust language, verbose, versus something like JavaScript is, has a lot of benefits that benefit me personally in the way that I learn.
Yep.
So were I still in back-end development, I don't think I'd be here today.
Okay.
I will say I did like database. Like I liked the really deep end stuff. I liked assembly language and all those really technical things, but it was just the back end for some reason never clicked with me.
I totally get what you mean by, the quick feedback loops. And the smaller the feedback, the quicker the gratification of actually getting something working and building upon, like, I always call it like, little Lego blocks. So perhaps you're building a big Lego house, but you have got to start with the small Lego blocks first. Yeah. Awesome. So in terms of, new developers coming on, do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah, I have a lot of advice for new developers, but one that I don't think I've ever given before is to surround yourself with like-minded people and people who support you. This is going to be a long journey. It's going to be a hard journey. So you need people who are also going through this struggle, people who have come out the other side of this struggle, and people who just genuinely believe in you, because there's nothing more demotivating than hearing, oh, you can't do it. Oh, I don't believe in you. It's going to destroy your morale. So find people, two kinds of people who support you and people who are in the same exact boat as you are.
Right. So that's really good advice. Find people that will support you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about mentoring. Coding Coach, that's a mentoring platform, right? Can you give a little bit of information about what Coding Coach is and perhaps your inspiration behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Coding Coach is an open source mentorship platform for any developer to find help. When I was at IBM on this design team, I was the only developer on the design team. And as such, I had a very hard time learning things when I had questions. I didn't have a mentor. And so I actually tried to start a mentorship program at IBM for the same kind of thing, right? I wanted anyone to be able to go in and find a mentor easily. And it didn't really take off because I don't think I was fully invested in it at the time. But last September, I was sitting in the Berlin airport, and I don't know what got into me, but I just ended up sending out like a tweet, and I was like, would people be interested in an open source mentorship platform that's free? And everyone was like, yeah. And I was like, let's build it. So I bought a domain and I set up all the Slack orgs, and we started it. And the goal of it is to provide anyone with an opportunity to find a mentor or to get technical help, right? Regardless of where in the world you are or whatever circumstances you have, you can find someone to help you. And it seems like this was just a need of the industry that hadn't been fulfilled from some of the other mentorship platforms, because it's not a novel idea, but it's free, right? I mean, almost everything these days costs money. And I understand, because people are devoting time and, they have special services to offer, but at a certain level, like mentorship is something that anyone would suggest if you're looking to succeed in development. You need that support system. And to have a barrier to entry for people, maybe people who don't have extra money laying around and can't afford it. That's what I think differentiates us, is that like you can join our Slack organization and talk to anyone and get the help that you need instantaneously with no fee. And I think that's where the wins are.
Awesome. So so you mentioned Slack, right? So is that how one communicates to a mentor?
Yeah, so we are currently building the fully fledged product at the moment. So what we've done is we've set up this alpha version, which is essentially just like a database of it's not even a database. We don't have a database. It's a JSON file, right? So basically, let's say I want to sign up as a mentor. I go to Coding Coach. I fork and clone the repo. You know what? I lied. We have a cool CLI tool. I go, I use the CLI and I enter my mentorship information, which is like my name, my location, what skills I want to mentor in. You open a pull request automatically once you're done with the CLI prompts, and you get added into this JSON file that pre-populates this, UI. So this is what we have currently. And as a mentee, I go and I search. Maybe I want someone in Germany. Maybe I want someone who knows, I don't know, Haskell. And I go and you can filter and what you do is you just directly contact the people, whether that's they list their own methods of contact. So either Slack or maybe like Twitter or whatnot, email. This is the alpha version we have today. Yeah. But in the future, this full platform will have integrated messaging. We're not looking to be the next video chatting service. And because I work at LogMe and we have a really cool meeting service called GoToMeeting. So we're not trying to be the next, real-time communication tool, but we will provide like an in-app chat service to get started and track your progress and all of that.
That sounds super cool. Yeah, that sounds super cool. What's the URL? So I'll put it down in the show notes, but I'll also put it on the screen here.
The full site will be at codingcoach.io. If you want to go to the alpha site, it's mentors.codingcoach.io.
Nice. So how does a mentor become a mentor? Because you've explained how one finds a mentor, but how does a mentor sign up?
So in terms of like maybe having qualifications, is that? Yeah. So this is kind of like not a source of contention, but maybe something that's kind of up for debate at the moment. So my viewpoint on this is, one, these people are offering their services for free and their time for free, right? I can't give them any compensation at the moment. So that's one. And given that, we didn't want to provide a barrier to entry. A lot of people really want to be mentors because for several reasons. I mean, they like giving back. It helps them get promoted. It looks good on a resume. There are a ton of reasons why, but that was the first thing is I didn't want a barrier to entry for this first version. Now, my question to myself was, do we want to set something in place for the full platform? And after some introspection, I think the answer right now is no. And the reason is everyone has something to offer. Everyone has a unique perspective on something, right? However, to vet the quality of these mentorships, we will have a feedback process, whether that's public reviews, whether that's ratings, whether that's something, right? But who am I to tell someone you're not good enough? Oh, I would never do that. Everyone has something to offer. So I think to become a mentor, there's no barrier to entry. I think that's on you to be introspective and say, yeah, I'm in a place where I could help someone, something that I have is valuable. But we will provide like feedback and reviews and whatnot.
That sounds cool. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. So once someone has found a mentor, and they go through whatever they're mentoring, is there a way that the student could give feedback upon the mentor?
Yeah. So not at the moment, because we really want to we need a database, right? We can't really do much with data that has no place to live. Okay. So we're working on that at the moment. I have had people reach out to me directly to give feedback, which is great. I haven't gotten any negative feedback. I will say, full transparency, we've had a couple people message and say, hey, I haven't heard back from some of the people I've emailed or contacted. And immediately I say, please send me their details. I will figure out what's going on. And so I'll contact the mentor at that point and see what's going on. And I'm very adamant about making sure that people respond, right? Because we need to ensure that if someone's putting themselves out there, if they are reaching out, that they get a response. And I think part of the problem here lies in this capacity indicator. We don't currently have one. So like if I have 12 mentees, like I'm full, like I don't have capacity, but I have no way to indicate that. So moving forward, we'll have something on the site to say, hey, like this person's pretty full at the moment. Like maybe you want to go check out, this person over here and whatnot. So that's one way we're alleviating it. But yeah, I've only gotten good comments other than that, which great. Is really, really heartwarming. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really good. That sounds really, really good. So is it, how does this mentoring system differ from perhaps other things? I can't think of any off the top of my head right now in terms of names of other mentoring groups, but is there anything that differentiates it from other mentoring systems?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that it's free, which I think is a good one. We also have a vast network. So I think we have over 2,200 people in our Slack organization alone, which is really great. So like people are very active, very helpful. We have plans, a lot of really good plans in the works. So a couple of things. We are starting a mock technical interview process, which is really cool.
Ooh,
so Chris
cool.
Valvilla is, he's an engineer at Envision. He's awesome. He has been there since like conception. He has been a front end lead, and he decided that we should do some mock interviews. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Who loves technical interviews? No one. We're all terrible at it. So he posted this mock job application. We've gotten some, people have to submit a resume, a cover letter, basically apply for like this real job and then go through the whole process. And then at the end of it, we'll provide feedback, we'll provide guidance. So that's one thing, because like, yeah, you can do mock technical interviews, but I haven't seen one that actually requires you to fill out like the resume and the cover letter and then, give feedback and whatnot. So that's really cool. And then we really love this idea of group mentorship classes. So maybe we'll do like a 5 or 10 seat class on, React mentorship. Right. And it's like, an interactive session. And so we have a lot of really cool ideas in the works. There is one other thing we're going to be doing, which is super cool. We're going to be partnering with Compassionate Coding. April Wenzel runs that program. Right. So we're going to hold a session. I think it's in June. I've got to check. So make sure to follow on Twitter, because I will be posting updates. But we're going to allow, we're going to cap a number of seats, but we're going to allow you to sign up for free and attend this course. It'll be just a couple of hours, and it'll teach you how to be a compassionate coder, how to write code compassionately. So, to be a good teammate, how to just be compassionate to your users, be empathetic towards them. So yeah, we're doing a lot of really cool things. I'm looking forward to collaborating with some other really cool, creators in the world. So
that is awesome. I mean, the whole interview thing, it's a complete mystery. It's like, a black magic type thing. Every technical interview I've had has been super different. So it's
I know.
And they've been super terrible. Well, some of them anyway. And the whole compassionate stuff is really, really interesting. And I think, moving on to what makes a developer improve themselves, I think you've hit on a lot of stuff already, compassionate coding, being able to have an interview. With that whole process, you need to speak to both technical and non-technical people. You need to have some level of soft skills. So yeah, I mean, let's move into becoming a better developer. What in your opinion, what is a quote unquote good developer?
I've got, I think, about 6 pointers I want to quickly touch on. So one is perseverance. So even when it gets hard, having the perseverance to push through those times and know that it will get easier. The willingness to admit when you're wrong. This is a really big one. I always preach that this is a huge skill, because you can't always be right. Like statistically, it's just not going to happen. Don't tell my husband, because I tell him that I'm right all of the time. But if you make a mistake, own up to it. Like, it's okay. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world, but it shows that you are self-aware. And you can grow. Good communication. We take communication skills for granted. So whether that's in writing, whether that's, face to face, just, work on your communication skills to foster those better team relationships. Willingness to learn. If the moment you stop learning, the moment you plateau, is like, it's almost, that's the only thing that could possibly kill your career for the most part, is when you stop learning. This sounds so cynical, and I don't mean it this way, but it's, like, you can't succeed if you stop learning. So keep learning, whether that's learning vertically within the area that you're currently in, whether that's learning laterally across many different things, just find something you like and learn about it. On top of that, willingness to teach, because we all have something really useful. We all have different ways of explaining things. You have to be able to teach your colleagues and whatnot. And then the last is open-mindedness. I have seen quite a few people in the industry who are very closed-minded, or who have very strong opinions on things, and opinions are okay, right? Generally, we form them for a reason. But you need to be open to exploring new technologies, new opportunities, and seeing, okay, like maybe the way I'm doing it isn't the best way to do it. So those are the skills, or the bullet points I'd say that make a good developer.
Yeah, that sounds like a good list, a good solid list there. I really dig the whole admitting fault thing, because it makes you accountable. It makes you aware of your mistakes. And if you admit to a mistake, you probably won't be making that again very soon, because it could be any kind of mistake, but let's just pick on like a technical mistake. You've made a mistake and it's been pushed to production, and there's been a whole hoo-ha over that. If you can say that it was me, then you will have that experience, and you'll be able to take that with you to other companies, other jobs, other projects, and you won't be making that again because of the experience that you've had. But also, just in terms of like being able to know where to look for these mistakes as well. Yeah. So like, even if that's going through log files and knowing where things sort of fall apart, I think that's really, really super important. So what in terms of non-technical skills though, do you think that there are more non-technical skills required for programmers wanting to become better programmers, or do you think that it is purely mostly down to technical skill?
I think it's subjective to a certain extent. I think it depends on the individual and the kind of work that they're doing, and also just their personal goals. So for me, I like to focus on my leadership skills and my business skills. Okay. I read a ton about leadership and business, and it's just something that I like. Like, I had a business minor in school. I went to leadership camps growing up. It's just something I enjoy, but that's not for everyone, right? Right. There are many different types of personalities in the world, and some people are like worker bees. They just like to keep their head down. They like to focus and get the task done. For me, I have trouble concentrating. I'm not going to lie, but I do like to lead. I like to plan things out. And so what I would say are my important skills that aren't technical might not fit with someone else. So I do think it depends on the individual. And, if you're someone who likes to be creative and who likes to, lead a team or want to start a project, I would say look into like leadership and business training. But when you get down to it, people skills are going to be very important as well. Again, not for everyone, but to a certain extent, yeah, it is kind of everyone, because you work on a team for the most part, unless you're like a solo freelance developer. You're working. No, I take it back. Everyone works with people. You got to have people skills. Even as a freelancer, you're going to have clients, right? You have to learn how to empathize with people, how to listen to people. So often we just shut people down. No idea is a bad idea. So we should, embrace that and listen to what people really have to say. So people skills, it's like we take that for granted, but it's a big part of development, or really any job. So
definitely. I take that point. So I'm a freelancer. I work for myself, and I usually go into clients where they've got legacy code. And there's sort of like a skeleton crew of devs. And for the most part, the stuff that I'm dealing with has been developed by other developers who don't exist in that company anymore. So you have a whole spaghetti of history and backstory. Plus you've got the product owners, the people who are actually going to pay you, and they have a tight, some have tight budgets, right? So you have to be aware of not only the technical needs, the technical history, but also the product requirements and the business needs. And once you understand those sort of pockets of information, then you can sort of, hopefully try and push the system forward, but be sort of empathetic on all avenues. And it's really, really difficult sometimes, because you're working with people who have either worked on this thing for years and years, so you don't really want to approach on their territory. And sometimes they are like, this is my baby, I'm not going to let it go. And then you've got the conversations where you can talk to business owners who aren't necessarily coders at all. And they are giving you the backstory of how the history of the company happened. So you kind of get that sort of, that whole history, and you try and merge the two things together. And when it works well, then it works really well. There's a lot of compromise. And I think that personally is a very important thing to bring to the table is compromise, because there is like everyone says, good practice, do good practice, do all the things that you should be doing. And yes, that is the case. And I really do support good practice. I certainly support testing and all of that other technical jazz. But when you're speaking to a business owner who is telling you how difficult it is to get funds together, you've got to put things in perspective. I guess I, from accident, have been able to merge the two worlds together. And it's been very interesting because you hear the different sides of the story, different sides of the table. So yeah, certain person skills are certainly something that I have personally been developing.
And I think we really need to be conscientious of who we're speaking to.
Exactly.
So let's say I need to prove the value of a design system, for example, and this conversation will be vastly different depending upon whether I'm talking to a designer or if I'm talking to product management, right? So we've got to say, okay, product management is probably more interested in the fiscal return or the, how long it's going to take, right? So figure out who you're talking to and what do they want to hear, right? Like what would make them the happiest and pull those pieces out of the benefits of what you're trying to do. The second is people like to be heard. And they like to feel like they matter. Luna agrees with me. So here's an example. We're building a design system. And there was a Bitbucket repository that a team had been working on for, I don't know, a year maybe. Can you hear that? Like,
yeah, it's fine.
Oh, this is embarrassing. Okay. So let me restart this. Okay. So there was a team working on a Bitbucket repository for what they called the design system, right? They called it Chameleon Design System. And now that we have established a true team to work on this design system, we've started building it from scratch, from, a baseline. And as such, we wanted to name it Chameleon Design System, but given that repository space namespace had been taken, we couldn't do it. And so I had to send them an email and I had to say, hey, we really appreciate all the work that you've been doing. We need you to change your name and here are exactly the reasons why. Engineers, we like steps, we like bullet points, we like finite data. So I said, here are the reasons why. I said, I know that this is frustrating. And the work that you've done is not getting thrown out. We would love your help developing this moving forward. So I think the biggest thing here, and they both replied very positively, right? This could have been like a hairy situation had I come in and been like, you got to change your name. It's not going to happen. We're the authority. But because I came in and I said, we appreciate the work that you've done. It's not getting thrown out. I want your help. Of course, they're willing to help. So I think any situation you can take it and you can identify the feelings and validate the feelings that these people are having, right? They're not always positive, and we can first validate them and then figure out what you can do to help with them. So yeah, I totally see your point. Yeah, it's the fact
that you are aware of their needs and what they've achieved so far, and you're not the one who's coming in and changing everything, pulling the carpet from underneath their feet. You're actually there to help enforce what they have started to build, right? So it's more about you becoming part of the team, not you being the whole team. Yeah. I totally get that. Just a quick story from my point of view. There was a client that I've dealt with, and they had the business owners had zero confidence in the dev team at the time. This was going back years and years and years ago, and this was because things were being rushed. Things were being not tested properly, and for no single fault. There was no sort of like fault of the developers or fault of the business owners. It was a joint fault. It was sort of like, they didn't give enough time. The developers didn't do enough testing. It's one of those sort of tug of war kind of scenarios. So I kind of looked at this and thought, well, how does one make this more transparent? Because the thing that was failing was communication. So, we set up things like Slack. We set up things like a Jira bug reports, that kind of thing. So they could see all the work that we were doing. And, this wasn't really in place beforehand. There was like these meetings that happened like once every blue moon. And it would be the same thing said in each thing. So, the output would be the same. It would be like, it's not ready yet. So we managed to sort of like boil that down into smaller little chunks, and the confidence level of the team is certainly not where it should be, but it is higher. And I wouldn't say that I was the sole person to sort of like push this forward. I helped the team get to that point. And it was a bit of a struggle at first, but it's certainly made everybody happy. Obviously the project managers want it like yesterday. So, that's not achievable, but at least they can see what we're actually doing.
Yeah, it's time consuming. Developers like to code, right? We don't like to spend time on documentation or anything like that. So, but I will tell you, transparency saves projects. At the end of the day, our stakeholders need to know where we're at. And not only that, when you have teams dispersed across the world, I work with people in California. It's very, very clear that we need a process in place to track where we are asynchronously. Yeah, definitely. When you're working in teams that are remote and they're all over the place, different time zones, you definitely need to have that level of transparency. You can't just hide in a room for a week and do some code. Yeah, that's the problem there is that when there's no communication, there is a greater emphasis on assuming things are being done or being done in a way that is assumed, and that's not always the case. So we've talked a little bit about how one. The certain skills of improving a developer. But do you have any kind of like big no-nos, as in what not to do to what would make a good developer bad? The first is gatekeeping. Don't do it. We all hate it. It's not friendly. We talked a little bit about this in the beginning, right? But gatekeeping is just a huge red flag. Like. I don't necessarily need to say much more than that. For the people who don't know what gatekeeping is, it's essentially when you're saying, oh, like your front end, you're not a real developer, or, oh, you code in, I don't know, you're a WordPress developer, you're not a real developer. It's essentially keeping a gate, keeping people out of the I'm a developer, I'm an engineer group. Not a good thing. Pessimism is another one. So everyone's pessimistic, right? Like I struggle with this a lot. I try to only really be positive online, but the reality of it is you're not always happy. However, don't just be pessimistic. I have worked with people in the past who they never had anything positive to say. It didn't matter what the topic was. It was always negative. And that drains the energy of your team, and it makes everyone cynical, and that's just not a productive environment. So it's okay to be pessimistic. It's okay to have negative thoughts. Do those in a controlled environment where you're very intentional about it. Don't be pessimistic at all times. So really watch how you do that. And then lastly is the inability to receive constructive criticism. Everyone needs to be able to accept constructive criticism. It's not something that we enjoy hearing. But you can kind of change your mindset about it, right? Like, yes, it's not fun to hear that, I don't know, you don't get stuff done on time, and that's the reason why your sprints are slipping, right? No one wants to hear that, or like, no one wants to hear that they have trouble focusing on one task, or like they're not using their problem solving skills effectively. But this is what other people outside see of you. This is their impression of you. And so being made aware of it means you can change it. When you're unable to receive constructive criticism, you're unable to grow as a person and as a colleague. And that's where you can really stunt your growth as a developer, but just as like a human. So you should really work on being accepting of constructive criticism, but also giving it, right? It's a gift. We just need to make sure that it's a safe space to do so, and everyone's aware that it's going to be happening.
That's some really, some good advice there. I never really thought about that. The safe space with the constructive criticism. I'm incredibly self-critical. But when someone gives me a little bit of criticism, it is tough to swallow.
Yeah, it is. I remember the first time, my colleague gave me some constructive criticism, and it kind of like totally blew my mind. At first, your first instinct is to get defensive. But once you get over that, it's like, you know what? There's some truth in what they're saying. And this is kind of how I approach internet trolls for the most part, is like, well, first you get angry and you're like, well, that's totally false. That's not true at all. And then you're like, well, maybe there's a little bit of truth in there. But when you establish a safe space and you say, hey, we're all going to give constructive criticism, this is the time and the place we're going to do it. So everyone comes into this knowing that like it's going to happen. They're mentally prepared for it. But when you catch people off guard, it's like the worst thing, especially because people handle things differently. Some people get upset, and the biggest pill I had to swallow was don't take it personally. This isn't something against you as a person. It's not saying they don't like you. It's saying they respect you enough to tell you these pitfalls so you can do something about it, right? Yeah. They're not talking about you behind your back. They're telling you these things because they genuinely respect you.
Yeah. That's so good. I mean, I've read some of your tweets, and I've seen how you've managed the old troll here and there. Hats off to you, because
it's hard. It's a fine line, because I like to educate people, but there are instances. There was one yesterday where I wouldn't say I was necessarily proud of the full way that I handled it, but this guy was berating people. He was berating them physically on their physical characteristics. He was calling them horrific names that no one should ever be called. And it got to the point where I was like, you know what? Like, people saying, dude, this is not cool. Like, you shouldn't talk to people like that. It wasn't sinking in with him. So I had to use like some kind of, humor to get through to him. Right. And it seemed like that maybe helped a little bit. It's a hard thing to judge, because I normally would take this time to educate someone, but then there's the person, and most of the time people will be like, okay, you know what, you're right, like whatever, I respect that. Or maybe we just say, we'll go our separate ways. It's fine. We don't have to agree. But then there are people who just get super defensive, and at that point, it's really hard for me to disconnect and walk away. And I think it physically impacts me as well. So it's hard.
I can imagine that. I mean, I think I know which one you were talking about. And I was reading it and I was getting angry.
I would not normally call someone out in such a way that I had. I wasn't disrespectful necessarily. I was putting him in the same position he was putting all of us in. And while I'm not fully proud of it, I don't agree with what the things that he was saying. You should never be nasty to someone, ever, right? You don't know what people are going through. And this is why I try not to, there have been instances where I have unintentionally bullied someone because I would maybe quote tweet something they said, not recognizing the fact that I have followers. And, as a byproduct, it could come off as other people bullying him or them or whoever it is. I would never intentionally do that. But I do think that we need to educate people, because if we just sit back and don't say anything, if we're inactive bystanders, that subconsciously tells them what they're doing is okay. And I will never sit there and say, yeah, you can call someone these names. You can tell them that, maybe they're not in the best shape of their life. No, like, that's never okay. That's not something that you ever get to say to someone. So, I just got a little fired up. But
yeah. I mean, that was outrageous. And the whole thing about social media is it's such a difficult war zone, because you don't want to fuel it, because, but you do want to educate it.
Right.
You want it to, you want to let people know that this isn't okay. But at the same time, you don't want to give that person any more sort of like, a platform to continue. So it's a very difficult fine line. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a lot about, soft skills. Is there any technical skills that you can mention that would help someone improve as a developer?
So I guess technically they're still soft skills, but they will help you improve your technical skills. So the first I want to just briefly touch on is atomic habits. So this idea of doing a little bit each day and having that compound into something, profound.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be an hour of studying a day. It could be 20 minutes. It could be, I don't know, just maybe do like one little coding challenge a day. Over time, they will compound, right? Secondly, don't focus on goals. So this is something for a long time. Like I was like, goals, got to write down my goals. While that's great, it's actually better to focus on a trajectory, right? So let's say that I want to become, let's say I want to become a better developer. Instead of saying I want to, have a 10-week GitHub streak of contributions. Let's say, no, I want to program every single day, or just focus on the trajectory. Am I on the path to making more consistent commits? Does that make sense? So like instead of having a tangible, like I need to do this amount of commits by this day, be like, I want to do a little bit every day. And so by pointing yourself at this general direction and analyzing, am I still pointed in this direction? That's going to be the biggest thing to get you to your goal. It's not, did I hit my commit number by this date? So focus on the direction, focus on the steps it's going to take to get you pointed in that direction, and just keep doing those things a little bit every day. And then the second thing was ask for constructive criticism, but I think we've touched on that. So,
okay, cool. I totally dig the GitHub commit streak. That's kind of a very weird sort of metric to go by. Oh look, I've made these.
People love metrics.
I know,
like,
right?
I don't understand why people are so like. I don't get it with anything, right? Like weight loss goals. Like I want to be this number on the scale by this date, and it's like you're still going to be unhappy with yourself when you hit that because you haven't changed your identity or your mindset. You need to change that. Like a number is not going to change things. Or I see a lot of people saying, I want to hit 3,000 followers by this date. And I'm like, follower count doesn't give you validation as a human. It just is an arbitrary number of people in the world who are subscribing to what you're saying. And you cannot genuinely find happiness out of that, right? What you find happiness out of is the interactions that come out of these that was redundant. The interactions that come out of communicating on the internet. You see what I'm saying? So don't focus on numbers, focus on building the skills that are necessary to get you to these places. And those numbers will come as a result.
Yeah. And also just to extend on that point, it is, something that I've spoken to other people about consistency is to not worry about bulking your Git commits up on like a Sunday. So don't just go, I'm not going to code for 6 days of the week and then Sunday, that's it. Boom. Yeah. I'm going to lock myself in the room and code, because that's not very productive. So if you could span those 8 hours out over the whole course of the week, then you'll be more productive.
And if that's a trajectory for burnout right there, it's I'm going to pile them all up into one day. It's like, tell me a time that you had to study for an exam and you crammed it all into 8 hours. Like, tell me how that went. Yeah,
right. Yeah, badly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just some points that I wouldn't mind raising is testing. So testing code, making sure it not only does what you think it should do, but it also doesn't do what it shouldn't do. And also something that I'm trying to do more of myself is get code reviews. And it's quite difficult being a remote dev, which is a freelancer, because there isn't really, because of NDAs and stuff, I can't just go, look at this code, random person, Right. So, but I think that having someone else's perspective on your code, reading your code, is so valuable. And it's something that I would love to do more of in the future. Yeah.
And also, please do not take HTML and CSS for granted. It breaks my heart when people are like, well, that's easy. I want to do JavaScript. I'm like, okay, well, come back to me when, accessibility is requiring you to go back and fix all of the divs that you've put in. I say that sarcastically, but at the end of the day, no, HTML and CSS are not hard, but you need to learn these foundational things to recognize that your products need to be usable by everyone, given any circumstance. No exceptions, right? Like maybe they won't have the same exact experience, but they'll get the same exact content from your site in an easy to find way. So learn semantic HTML, learn CSS. It's actually a lot more technical than you give it credit for. It's a lot of fun. Go read about CSS specificity. I've got a blog on it. It's a lot of fun math. So these things can be fun if you make them fun. Just don't take them for granted.
Yeah, that's some really, really solid advice there. Really, really solid advice. Do you have any other advice to advance developers on before we wrap up?
Get involved in the community. Find something that you enjoy and be active there, whether that's a blogging platform or like social media. It's a great way to keep motivated. And just stay humble. Like, regardless of how many people are, looking at your repositories or how many people read your blogs, like, that doesn't matter if you're not humble. So stay humble. Remember why you do the things that you do, because that's how you're going to be successful if you remember the why.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's such a nice piece of advice there. Stay humble. Well, thank you ever so much, Emma, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
It's been awesome. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much. And thanks ever so much for everyone who is watching on the YouTubes and also listening on the podcasts. Thanks ever so much. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.